And once again to the Republican presidential race as the candidates sprinted toward a pair of key nominating contests in the South tomorrow. The Republican race had a decidedly Southern flavor today, with Mitt Romney, Rick Santorum, and Newt Gingrich all campaigning in Alabama or Mississippi. On Fox and Friends this morning, Romney said regardless of what happens there Tuesday, he is ultimately going to beat Santorum, his nearest rival.
Well, we're closing the deal state by state, delegate by delegate. I guess 2.5 times as many delegates as he has, about the same number of state advantages that he has, many more Republican voters that he has. And by the way, we're pretty pleased with the progress we're making.
In fact, late polling suggested Santorum and Gingrich might split the more conservative vote tomorrow and create an opening for Romney. With that in mind, the former Massachusetts governor campaigned in rainy Mobile, Alabama today, winning the endorsement of comedian Jeff Foxworthy. Meanwhile, on NBC's Today Show, Rick Santorum was doing his own calculations and insisting that Romney won't win if the contest goes to the Republican convention.
They are not going to nominate a moderate Massachusetts governor who has been outspending his opponent 10-1 and can't win the election outright. What chance do we have in a general election if he can't, with an overwhelming money advantage, be able to deliver any kind of knockout blow to other candidates?
Santorum did beat Romney on Saturday for a win in the Kansas caucuses, but Romney won in Wyoming and did well enough in Guam, the Virgin Islands, and the Marianas to win the most delegates of the day. Back in the South, Newt Gingrich focused on President Obama and gas prices today at a Gulf Coast Energy Summit in Biloxi, Mississippi.
The president's trapped because on the one hand, he really does believe in a green energy, high technology, very expensive energy, get away from all fossil fuels theory of life. On the other hand, he is faced with Americans who drive trucks and cars, which rely on fossil fuels.
And as gas prices keep rising, a new ABC Washington Post poll showed the president's approval dipping below 50% again. At the White House, spokesman Jay Carney played down the findings.
The president, the administration is not focused on polling data. We are obviously aware that Americans are paying a very high price when they fill up their gas tanks. And the president is focused on that and concerned about it and understands the kind of impact that has on hardworking American families who are trying to make ends meet.
The rising price of gas increasingly shapes up as an issue this fall. But for now, the Republican hopefuls were mainly focused on the voting tomorrow in Alabama and Mississippi, with 90 delegates at stake. For more on tomorrow's primaries in Alabama and Mississippi, we are joined by Steve Flowers, a syndicated political columnist and host of Alabama Politics. He also served 16 years as a Republican in the Alabama House of Representatives. And Sid Salter, he's a journalist in residence at Mississippi State University. Thanks to you both. Steve Flowers, I'm going to start with you because Alabama, with 50 delegates, has 10 more than Mississippi. Tell us what the contest looks like in Alabama right now.
Well, we're in a dead heat. We're all candidates coming out of the weekend and tracking polls had them about 30% each. So we may be one of the tightest races in the country.
And what are the candidates, Steve Flowers? What is their main message to the voters in your state?
Looks like the evangelical fundamentalists have gravitated to Santorum because he's the most conservative on the social issues. And Gingrich is probably benefiting from the fact that he is a Georgia candidate. The South has a more pronounced friends and neighbors politics, if you will, than the rest of the country. The fact that Gingrich is from Georgia is benefiting him and putting him in the race where he probably would not be otherwise. Matter of fact, the last person to carry Alabama as a Democrat was Jimmy Carter in 1976. And he was a devout Southern Baptist peanut farmer from South Georgia, and he very narrowly carried the state. And then Romney is probably getting the mainstream voter, probably the person who thinks that Romney is a better candidate to beat Obama.
And Sid Salter, what about in Mississippi? Is Gingrich advantaged because of the time he spent in the South?
I think the biggest advantage that Gingrich has right now is he's hit on a very populist issue in the $2.50 gas. That said, it appears to me, much as in Alabama, that the takeaway is shaping up for the Mississippi primary that Mitt Romney is doing and will do much better here on Tuesday than forecast by virtually anyone.
And why do you think that is?
Well, number one, there's been sort of a carpet bombing of robocalls, of paid media. I mean, they have spent a lot of money. They've also had organizational skills brought to them by Austin Barber, the nephew of Haley Barber. That name still political gold in a lot of areas of Mississippi. And the other thing that I think is that people in Iowa and New Hampshire are used to this kind of attention. Mississippi has been traditionally a tarmac state where candidates hold a press conference on the airport tarmac and then get back on the plane and leave. This time they're getting a lot of attention, and it's generating a significant amount of interest.
So, Steve Flowers, if it's the same way in Alabama, does that mean people are more interested and more of them are likely to turn out and vote tomorrow?
Yes, I think so. I think the presidential race is the first time we've had any relevance in the presidential race. As the gentleman from Mississippi mentioned, we are forgotten in the general election because it's a foregone conclusion that whoever the Republican nominees will carry our states. So this is the first time, because of the prolonged Republican race, that we've had any candidates come to our state. They're crisscrossing the state, and there's signs, there are billboards, there are television ads, and most of the ads are negative. But they seem to be trending, and I agree with the guy from Mississippi that Romney may surprise folks tomorrow because the momentum may be with him.
And you're talking about Alabama?
Yes.
Sid Salter, back to you. Tell us who the Republican voters are in the state of Mississippi. Tell us a little bit about them.
Well, primarily you're looking at voters who define themselves as anti-abortion, pro-gun, primarily pro-business, evangelical, all of the hot buttons that one would traditionally associate with conservative and primarily Republican voters in the South. But you're seeing this time Romney's sheen of growing inevitability begin to shine through some of those evangelical concerns, and I think that's the reason that much is happening in Alabama. We've almost got an even split now, with Ron Paul picking up a negligible amount of the vote, and Romney, Santorum, Gingrich getting to a point. And if anybody 6 months ago said Mitt Romney would get a strong second in Mississippi, they would have had their head examined. That's very much what is trending right now.
Steve Flowers, back to you in Alabama. Is that a factor in your state as well, that Republicans are looking at Mitt Romney and seeing maybe he's going to be the one, and that's who I want to be with, regardless of whether I may share more values with the other two?
I think definitely so. You know, Alabama has had, it's assumed that we in the South are different, and we are because we're more conservative. However, throughout the course of the entire campaign, whoever was hot, the flavor of the month, was hot in Alabama. Michelle Bachmann was hot, then Rick Perry, then Herman Cain, and then Santorum, and it seems as though we're trending like the national trend, although we have more evangelical voters than the rest of the country. I think that what you're seeing is that a lot of Republican voters, not only in Alabama and maybe Mississippi, but also nationwide, are trying to ascertain who is the best candidate to beat Obama. There's a fervor among conservatives in Alabama and throughout the country, I feel, to defeat President Obama, and they're voting for Romney in deference to whatever they may like him or not. They feel like he is the best candidate against Obama. And matter of fact, some of the negative ads that I saw over the weekend indicated that Gingrich may be drawn from the same well that Romney did. You know, Gingrich did very well in the debates. And so for a lot of people who were watching those debates and gravitated to Gingrich in that regard. So I saw a lot of negative ads that Romney was running against Gingrich. He may perceive that Gingrich is getting that same voter who is saying we want to beat Obama at all costs.
And just quickly, finally, back to you, Sid Salter. Where does that leave Santorum and his appeal?
Santorum really needs the win, in my opinion, in Mississippi and Alabama far more than Gingrich. Gingrich has said he's in regardless. Santorum hasn't yet made that claim. He needs the win, and I think his performance against Romney particularly is disappointing to him and to his supporters.
Well, we are going to leave it there, gentlemen. We thank you both, Sid Salter in Mississippi, Steve Flowers in Alabama. We appreciate it.